The clarity paradox is a fascinating concept because it shows how sometimes what seems like deprivation can actually lead to abundance, particularly when it comes to mental energy, focus, and brain power. Dry fasting, the practice of abstaining from both food and water for specific periods, might sound extreme at first, even counterintuitive. Yet countless people who explore this discipline discover a surprising sense of mental clarity and heightened focus that they never expected. This is the paradox. By withholding something essential, like food and water, the brain does not weaken, but sharpens. The edges of thought become clearer. The fog of distraction lifts. Before diving deeper, I would like to invite you to join our Telegram channel. The link is in the description, where you will find extended discussions, guidance, and community support on these topics. Now, why does this paradox of clarity exist in the first place? To answer this, we need to look at how the brain functions under different metabolic conditions. The brain is the most energy-hungry organ in the human body, using up to 20% of all the calories we consume, even though it makes up only about 2% of our body weight. Under normal circumstances, the brain runs primarily on glucose, the sugar derived from food. But during fasting, especially dry fasting, the body shifts into a different metabolic state. Without food, glucose begins to run low, and without water, the body accelerates certain adaptive processes. It begins producing ketones from fat stores, and these ketones serve as an alternative fuel for the brain. Strikingly, ketones are not just a backup plan. Many studies suggest they are actually a cleaner, more efficient source of energy for neurons. They reduce oxidative stress, promote mitochondrial health, and enhance signaling in brain cells. This is why many people report sharper focus, steadier energy, and heightened awareness during fasting states. Another part of the clarity paradox has to do with the body's response to stress. Dry fasting is a form of controlled stress, and when done responsibly, it activates pathways in the body that are designed to strengthen resilience. This concept is called hormesis, where a small amount of stress actually makes the body and mind stronger. Think of it like exercise for your cells. Just as lifting weights breaks down muscle fibers temporarily so they can rebuild stronger, dry fasting puts mild stress on your systems, so they adapt in ways that enhance performance. At the cellular level, this triggers autophagy, the body's natural recycling program, which clears out damaged proteins and cellular debris. As the body becomes cleaner internally, the brain benefits. Neural connections become more efficient, and the noise of cluttered metabolic activity fades away. This biological spring cleaning produces mental clarity, a sense that the mind has been decluttered in the same way the body has. The mental clarity from dry fasting also connects deeply with psychological and spiritual dimensions. When the body is not busy digesting food and processing water, mental energy seems to shift inward. Many people describe a heightened sense of awareness, as though thoughts are more precise and emotions are easier to observe without becoming overwhelmed by them. This is why fasting has been part of spiritual traditions for thousands of years. From ancient religious rituals to modern biohacking, fasting has been a pathway toward deeper self-knowledge and transcendence. It strips away distraction and forces you to face the raw state of your mind. In this vulnerable space, new insights arise. Old thought patterns are seen clearly. Sense of peace often replaces the constant hunger for stimulation. Of course, dry fasting should not be taken lightly. It is powerful, but it must be done with caution, preparation, and respect for the body's limits. Beginners should always start small, with short intervals, and gradually increase as they learn how their body responds. Consulting a professional before attempting long fasts is also wise. The goal is not punishment but optimization. When practiced wisely, dry fasting becomes a tool for unlocking mental and physical performance rather than a dangerous challenge. Think of it as a skill that requires practice. Just as you would not attempt to run a marathon without training, you should not attempt an extended dry fast without first conditioning your body. Scientific research on fasting continues to uncover fascinating connections to brain health. Studies show that fasting boosts the production of brain-derived neurotrophic factor, or BDNF, which acts like a fertilizer for neurons. Higher BDNF levels mean better communication between brain cells, stronger memory formation, and even protection against neurodegenerative diseases. By increasing BDNF, dry fasting may help keep the brain young, adaptable, and resilient. There is also evidence that fasting improves neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to reorganize and form new connections. This is vital for learning, creativity, and problem solving. In other words, the very act of depriving yourself of food and water for a controlled period can, paradoxically, help the brain become more flexible and capable. Another surprising effect of dry fasting is the emotional clarity that comes with it, because the practice reduces inflammation and stabilizes energy. Many people notice that their moods improve, irritability decreases, anxiety lessens, and a calm sense of presence emerges. This is another layer of the paradox. You would think denying yourself food and water would create agitation, but when done correctly, it often produces emotional stability and mental calm. This calmness is not just a passive state, but an active form of clarity, where you feel centered and grounded. Decisions seem easier to make because the noise of cravings and scattered emotions has quieted. But the paradox extends further still. Fasting, and especially dry fasting, also strengthens willpower and self-discipline. Every time you resist the urge to eat or drink, you reinforce the part of the brain that governs long-term decision-making. You prove to yourself that you are not controlled by impulses, but instead, you are capable of directing your own behavior. This builds confidence that spills over into other areas of life. If you can master your hunger, you can master procrastination, negative thinking, or unhealthy habits. The practice of restraint becomes training for freedom. Let us also consider the paradox in terms of productivity. When you dry fast, the hours of the day seem to stretch longer, not because time has changed, but because your mind is not scattered. The combination of stable energy, reduced decision fatigue, and heightened focus makes tasks that normally feel heavy suddenly flow more smoothly. Work that might have taken 3 hours in a distracted state gets finished in half the time. This efficiency creates a sense of achievement, and achievement fuels motivation. You feel accomplished, capable, and in control, which in turn fuels further productivity. Despite all these benefits, it is important to emphasize that dry fasting is not for everyone. There are risks if it is approached recklessly or without preparation. Dehydration can become dangerous if taken too far, and not all bodies respond the same way. Anyone with medical conditions should consult a professional before experimenting with this practice. The paradox only becomes beneficial when balanced with wisdom. The idea is not to push the body to extremes, but to discover the sweet spot where discipline meets insight. This is where the greatest clarity is found, not in reckless deprivation, but in mindful self-experimentation. Ultimately, the clarity paradox is a reminder that sometimes less really is more. By stepping away from constant consumption, by allowing the body and brain to rest from the endless cycle of food and drink, you unlock hidden reserves of energy, focus, and power that you did not know existed. The mind becomes lighter, sharper, and freer. It is as if you trade quantity for quality, and in that trade, you discover a version of yourself that is calmer, clearer, and more capable. Dry fasting is not simply about not eating or drinking. It is about discovering what happens when you step into the silence of your own biology and realize that clarity comes not from adding more, but from subtracting the unnecessary. And if this video has given you value, I kindly ask you to consider contributing through the thanks button below. Every contribution, no matter how small, is important and helps us continue sharing this knowledge.